Oh, I'm sorry, hold on, are you ready?
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're good now, sorry.
Dan Maddie from the Freiberger Law Firm is here tonight to just present on a proposed amendment to the Saturday Heights LLC on the Hill amendment to our current purchase agreement. That includes the master planning document that we saw at the committee of the whole, and then some other minor things. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan Maddie to explain that this will be put on the consent agenda as a non-controversial item to add to our purchase agreement going forward.
Well, thank you. It's good to see all of you again. When we entered into the purchase agreement last August now for the sale of the Central High School campuses, which is what I call our new Central campus, the purchase agreement anticipated that there would be a process involving the district and Saturday properties where we would develop a master plan for the property that accommodates the development the school district wants to do in the back of the property for an administrative building, and sites in the front of the property that would be available for the developer to develop and purchase in pieces. So the master development plan that you saw a preview of is that plan. It sets out the layout of the campus. It sets out 8 sites instead of what we had anticipated would be 6 sites, but that's good because according to our realtor, that provides us with 8 saleable sites for housing development. They're all for housing development. The purchase agreement then anticipates that the master plan and an amendment to the purchase agreement would allocate the purchase price between those parcels. And I don't know whether you received those allocations or not, but they're set out in the amendment that you will be approving. They're set out by site. The purchase prices were developed by Saturday Properties. They were reviewed by Greg Fulmer, your broker. The prices reflect the desirability of the different sites and the expected intensity of development of each of those sites. So, as is required, the master plan shows us how the sites will be divided. They allocate the purchase price among those sites. They also have developed an infrastructure budget and schedule, which were required. And the amendment that you will be approving divides up the responsibility for paying for the infrastructure between the school district and the developer. For the most part, you will share the cost of the road that comes up from central entrance to the site, which on our plans, maybe they showed them to you, we call the white road. You will then have some responsibility for the road that then goes from the top of the white road to the area of the administrative site. And then there's a road that goes along the front of the administrative site that they call the red road, and you bear a portion of the responsibility for that road. The rest of the infrastructure obligations that serve the rest of the site, those are going to be the responsibility of the developer. They will pay those and incur some of those as they develop their sites across the property. They have latitude on which order they purchase the sites from you. We anticipate, but they're not required, that they will purchase the most, to me, easterly sites 1 and 2 on the master plan, and then maybe others. So we expect them to purchase and develop in stages. They also have agreed to a schedule, essentially, where they agree to purchase a certain price worth of property in tranches. So they'll buy some of the property. They've agreed that based on how much they spent on the first properties, they'll buy more properties by another date and more properties by another date.
Are we gonna get a summary of all of this? We don't
Yep.
have anything about
You
this
should
yet.
get you should receive, well, so we were still negotiating this morning,
Okay,
the amendment itself.
okay.
So, I'm gonna go back into a little bit of the detail of the amendment too, and then of course you should have the amendment in front of you. We have a couple of blanks to fill in, but I think otherwise we've negotiated what we want to present to you. So, mostly I've been talking about their obligation to provide a master plan for the school district to review and approve. Once that master plan is approved, which will be a part of the next school board meeting, then there will be an application made to the city. The application must be consistent with the master plan. We both have rights in that fact. Then there's going to be a period of time, and I'll talk about that more specifically, for them to receive those approvals. If they do not receive those approvals, either the district or the developer can terminate the agreement. So I want to be a little, I'm going to go through, and I'm sorry, I didn't know you didn't have any of this, but I'm going to go through some of the specific items that are in the agreement. So remembering the big picture, which is the master plan, which sets forth how they intend to develop the property. This then has specific provisions that incorporate a new map, which is primarily the master plan that you've seen. So that now sets forth what they're going to buy and how they're going to develop it.
Oh, sorry, let me just scroll up. This one.
This has a specific exhibit that allocates the purchase price across the sites that you see up there. So they're buying, we're keeping the yellow, but they're buying the rest of it in pieces. The specific purchase prices are set forth in an exhibit, and they're, again, were reviewed by Mr. Fulmer on your behalf to determine whether they would seem to be fair and reasonable prices on a piece-by-piece basis. Then there are, we negotiated some of the timelines further, so that we've now agreed, if you approve of it, that they will have until, and some of these dates are subject to confirmation because we're waiting for some information from the city. They will have until May 15th of this year to complete their due diligence. Just as before, there's 2 overlapping periods of time where they can terminate their agreement. The second is, and the current date that's in here is July 31, 2022. That's to receive their public approvals. The public approvals should include approval of the financing plan they have for the property, which they're negotiating with the city about TIF financing. And it should include the principal approvals where the city says, yes, you can develop according to this master plan. The district staff will have an opportunity to participate throughout the process. There will be a development agreement that the city will draft that the district may be or may not be a party to, but we'll have an opportunity to review whatever agreements Saturday Properties enters into, whatever approvals they request, so that we know that they are proceeding with approvals that are consistent with the master plan that you're going to approve.
Can I ask you to clarify? So the city required us to do a master planning agreement because they wanted to see the holistic approach of the site and make sure that both parties understood what this was going to look like before everybody came forward.
That's right. The city's been after the district for some time now to develop an overall plan for how the campus will be developed. They've allowed the district to go forward some of the backside. Originally, they were not going to allow that separate from the master plan. It looks like they will allow us to go forward, but they still want this master plan to say, how do we envision developing the rest of the property? What infrastructure is going to come in? What uses are going to be made? So in addition to making the property available to sell to Saturday Properties, we're also accommodating a request from the city or a requirement from the city.
And just to
Yep.
clarify too, that part of our agreement, in the purchase agreement, is that both us and Saturday Properties will own the master planning document.
Yes.
And so that's important for us to know that the work, and if you guys recall from our meetings leading up to the purchase agreement being agreed to, we invested the first $180,000 of the master planning agreement as part of the closure, so that, just so we're kind of bringing it full circle, this was all agreed to last August, and now we're just getting to this point of getting the document so that we can then, we've already been advancing forward because the city did allow that, but this is gonna allow Saturday Properties now to start advancing their communications with the city.
So some of those timeframes that I had just mentioned, the new due diligence period and new public approvals period, are extensions beyond what we agreed to in the original purchase agreement. It took considerably longer than I think that at least we understood it would take for us to agree on a master plan and with all of the elements that we believe it should have. It is an accomplishment, at least on paper, to get where we are, in that we have a meaningful idea of how we at Saturday Properties want to develop the property. And so we've done a little bit of a reset on some of the timelines, because it's not realistic to think that they would get these public approvals because they haven't even really applied for anything, because we are just now agreeing on what the plan should be. The next most important item to me has to do with when we're going to take down the building. So we cannot take down the Central High School building until they've been able to set the stage for their TIF financing. We've had some back and forth on that. Originally, the developer's belief was that we could not demolish the building until they had their TIF fully approved by the city. The current belief, and this is my belief too, is that we can demolish the building anytime after there's been a light study of the building that's been approved by the city. So that's a much shorter time frame. That will start a clock for us on when we can demolish Central High School. Some of their proposals were not realistic, and because they ran from the end of the public approvals period, and they ended before the end of this year, which would have left us a very narrow period of time, and probably in the winter, to take down Central High School. Now, the date, anytime after May 31, we can demolish Central High School, and we'll have 180 days from May 31 to do that. We talked with your engineers that you're working with on the site. They are going to start preparing the bid documents and specifications and starting working with the city, knowing that there is a date that they can work from. They have expressed confidence to the staff and to me that they can take down Central High School this summer or this fall, which would be well within the time frame that's going to be required by the agreement. As you know, the city's been pushing very hard for the demolition of Central High School.
Does the demolition include like removal of all the parking lots and everything too, or is it just demolition of the building?
It's demolition of the building. So we do have to demolish the building and grade where the building is. So that's our demolition completion.
And Dan, there is and maybe Dave can explain this better than me, there's a slight encroachment into our final road into that area, so it is important for us to have the dark blue sections, which is where the central building is, demoed soon, so that becomes a part of our development phase. So it's not critical from a timeline perspective, but there is impact on the district, not just Saturday Properties, because we push in just slightly into that area where the Central High School currently is.
other principal subject of the First Amendment has to do with the letter of credit. So I don't remember how much you remember about the letter of credit, but the current purchase agreement provides that at the closing of the second site, they will provide the district with a letter of credit amount of $2 million. And that letter of credit will stay in place until they purchase the Central High School site. When we negotiated the purchase agreement, we did not anticipate that they would divide the Central High School site into 4 pieces. We asked for the letter of credit for a couple of different reasons. One is that, as with a lot of developers, there's no telling what the financial wherewithal or capacity of the developer is. And so we wanted some assurance that they would purchase the Central High School site to recoup, so that you would be able to recoup the $2 million cost of demolishing the building. So we took the purchase price, $5.4 million, and we increased it to $7.4 million. We said they had to allocate $2 million or more to the Central High School site, and they had to provide us with this letter of credit. When they divided Central into 4 pieces and did the other things that they were supposed to do, and convinced us, or our realtor anyway, that these were separate, developable, saleable sites, they came to us and said, we think we shouldn't have to provide the letter of credit.
Who's the they?
They is the developers, so that's Saturday Properties.
City or?
So that's Mark Laverty, Nate Bryson, and their group. So our reaction was, no, there was more to it than just dividing it into 4 different boxes instead of 1. We had reasons for requesting the letter of credit, and we did not agree to that. So we countered with, when you have purchased the 4 sites that are Central High School now, then we'll release the letter of credit. They made some arguments to us why we should compromise from that position, and what we are proposing in the amendment, we just agreed upon the text this morning, if it's acceptable to you, is the following. They can have the letter of credit released when they have purchased all 4 of those sites, or they can have the letter of credit released when they have purchased site 1 and 2. So if you look at the top, those are the 2 closest to central entrance. We do expect them to purchase those early on. When they purchase sites 1 and 2, any combination of lots 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are the 4 Central High School sites, that have a purchase price of $2 million or more. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that they have purchased a substantial portion of the site, including a substantial portion of the Central High School parcels, which is what we had tied the letter of credit to in the past.
What is the letter of credit allow for? The letter of credit, what does it allow for? Why would we need one? I mean, what is the purpose of having?
So the purpose of the letter of credit was to assure that they had the capacity to buy the last piece. We always assumed that the last piece would be Central High School. And we wanted to make sure that we recovered the purchase price for Central, which we said had to be $2 million or more, because we wanted to make sure that the district recouped the expense of demolishing the Central High School building. So the letter of credit would be there if they defaulted under the purchase agreement and didn't purchase all of the sites, except that we agreed that once they did buy the Central High School site, we'd let the letter of credit go. So letter of credit is essentially a financing device where a bank says, if the circumstances occur that are set forth in your agreement, you can draw on this $2 million line of letter, and the bank is obligated to fund that payment. So it's a very strong financial incentive for them to do what they've agreed to do. In this case, that is primarily focused on purchasing the central high school site.
So our hope is that, so first of all, we built in the $2 million into the total purchase price when they buy the whole campus. So the $2 million is in the $7.4 million that's part of the purchase agreement. So does everybody, so if they buy all 9 parcels, we've received the $2 million. We created the line of credit in the event that they choose not to purchase or default on certain parcels of property. And initially, when we went into this whole process, was we just assumed they'd buy the most view shed rich properties first and leave the less attractive properties that included central. And we didn't want to sell those and then have unattractive parcels to be able to be sold. So we went with the line of credit to say, if they default and don't finish, then we're still going to recoup that $2 million. They've now since changed their philosophy of what they're going to purchase, which is great news, I think, for development. It's great news for the city. And so there's less risk for the district in the event of a potential default or not finishing off purchasing all the parcels. The remaining parcels that aren't sold will be much easier to resell or redevelop and put back on the market. So we're willing to say the $2 million line of credit, which is attached to basically parcels 1 through 6, will then absorb that $2 million and we'll be able to recoup in the event, and we're not expecting that right now. I mean, we always have to think about it, but we are expecting that through the 5 closures that are involved in the phased purchasing of this property, that they'll all get sold. But this was a safety net in the original intent that should they choose not to purchase all the property, we'd have this line of credit to say we're covering that amount is going to cover the cost of the demolition.
So once they've spent $2 million on any of the parcels?
Any of the central high school parcels.
Okay.
So there are 4 of those. They've allocated approximately $3.3 million to those 4 parcels. So it's when they've purchased any of those 4 where together they've paid us $2 million for those 4. Or they've purchased all 4 of them. I'm going to confuse that. So if they purchase 1 and 2,
Right.
then if they purchase any combination of 2, 3, 4, and 5, where they've paid a purchase price of $2 million or more, then it will get released. That's one possibility. The other possibility is they buy 2, 3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yep. The 4 central sites.
And that's what I was trying to get in my mind, to make sure that it's not just based on they buy parcels 1 to 2 and they're absolved.
No, that was their original proposal. So that was when we said we weren't going to get rid of the letter of credit. Their original counter proposal was, well, as soon as we spend $2 million on parcels, and we said, no, our concern has more to do with your overall ability. It's not the first $2 million, it's the $2 million related to the central sites that was important to us.
Is there a firm deadline on when they have to purchase all of them by? When was
5 years after the first closing, and the first closing has a time frame. The first closing has to be 180 days, within 180 days after the public approvals period ends. So currently the purchase agreement provides for a July 31 end of public approvals period. Again, that's a little up in the air because we're waiting to hear something from the city. So it would be approximately 6 months after that.
So roughly by the end of the year.
Yep, early next year, end of this year, yes. And then they have to have purchased all of them within a 5-year period. And in this version of the purchase agreement, since this is amending the purchase agreement, they've given us a schedule where they promised to buy at least a certain dollar amount by certain dates. And that's in the, we don't have it
And are those dates enforceable then if they're in there?
They're enforceable, they'll be in default if they don't close. And I'm gonna remind you of something we talked about a long time ago. We have the right to enforce the purchase agreement, but your remedies are not that significant. So yes, they are enforceable.
It would be good to note that they are very enthused, and I think it will go quicker than what we've anticipated, but
From what the way they're talking on our conference calls, and we talk once a week or more, it sure sounds like that, you know, but
you never know.
right, I've done enough deals that I always say, you know, it's never closed till it's closed, but.
I think it wouldn't be surprising to say we may see additional amendments to the purchase agreement
Yes.
coming forward, where similar to the historic central, where we had multiple amendments to advance the timeline, to change some of the structure. This is a gigantic deal compared to the $3 million historic central project. And so this for us has multiple dimensions, and as Dan shares with us often, you know, we're working in cooperation with the developer just so as long as we're always meeting the best interest of the district first. And so we want to be as accommodating as we can be, knowing that, like, for example, the master planning agreement took longer than we expected, but it was very good and comprehensive once we received it. So we felt better about working through that. Dan and his team working through this amendment, and the letter of credit or line of credit was, it took us a while because they really wanted nothing. They wanted us to abandon it, but we really felt as a district that this protection was really important for the district. And we don't know what's going to happen on Central on the Hill, but we are so appreciative of the feedback we're getting from the community, the feedback that we're hearing by having them at our board meetings, and I think there's a lot of positivity from the city of Duluth as well. So we just want to be able to maintain that, but we're really trying to be as cooperative as we can be within the terms of what Dan Eddy tells us we need to support.
Well, so I think as long as you believe being cooperative is in the best interest of the district, which is how you qualified it, then being cooperative is probably a good thing. Always remember that you generally don't have to cooperate. If they come to you and ask you to change the deal, like they are right now with the letter of credit, you don't have to say yes. You have to evaluate whether you think that that's within the spectrum of the kinds of accommodations that get made as the deal develops. This deal is developed differently, and probably in a positive way than we expected when we first put the purchase agreement together. And also, if they come to you in the future and say, we want this accommodation or that accommodation, we're not required to say yes. If you do not believe what they're asking for is good for the district, then either do something different with them, or say no, or go look for somebody else. What we're hoping is with the master development plan in place, that the saleability, that it will be easier for you to be able to parcel off and sell the pieces of the campus to somebody else if Saturday property does not.
If they choose to, they get halfway through developing, they put in 300 units for housing and then decide they don't want to do housing anymore, but they might want to do an office building or something like that, and that would definitely change the master agreement. Would that kind of thing have to go all the way back to the city then for approval and come back to us to negotiate? Is that okay? Or is that just something they could just do?
So it kind of will depend on how the city chooses to approve the master plan, and so it goes back to this issue of we have the right to review and have a voice in how the master plan is approved. That's one of the reasons that we asked them to include in the master plan a description of other than some pictures on a map, how tall are these buildings gonna be, how many units are gonna be in these buildings? My expectation would be they would have to go back to the city if they wanna do something different than what's shown here on this master plan. And depending on where it was in the process of us selling sites to them, we would have a voice either directly or indirectly as a part of the zoning and approval process.
So it's possible if they purchase one of the sites and it's already closed,
Yep.
and then they decide to change the
Yep.
use of it, we're a commenter. We don't have any control. If it hasn't yet been sold, then we would probably be more a part of it.
That's correct.
Who is the city? When we talk about the city has to do this.
So we anticipate that the city here is going to be the city planning office, and it will include at least the planning commission, and may include the city council, depending on what approvals they ultimately need for the site. If we need to rezone it, it will have to go to the city council. Again, it depends a little bit on what zoning mechanisms they use for this approval. There are some approvals that are kind of like negotiated zoning, and an example of that is Bluestone development, where they went in and they have a special zoning district established. They get approval from the city in a planning document that sets the parameters of what can be developed there. And then as they do each portion of the development, they have to have a plan for that portion, approved not by the council, but by the planning commission and the staff. So the starting point is city planning, also engineering, but city planning. Then the planning commission, and in a few instances, probably the city council.
And we've been a part of a couple processes with the city when we needed to have a plat or something. We had teams from the district had to go to the planning and zoning commission. We were listeners, and there was no questions. It was unanimously recommended, and we were able to move forward. But there could be, as Dan mentioned, there could be occasion that something rises all the way to the level of the city council, which was why we felt it was really important to meet with city councilors and county commissioners when we did our mini tours up at the site, and they've been really good about knowing that they can come to the district if they continue to have questions. But ultimately, this is really transitioning to the city. We're more now the observer than we are the actor, and as we keep doing potential closes and move forward, they'll be kind of taking center stage on what this development is going to look like from a city perspective. So I just want to share, I don't know if you have more.
No, I just wanted to hit the principal reasons why we're gonna have this amendment, how it relates to the master plan.
So we'll work with Dan. You'll get the actual document, but we'll provide a cover summary that will just go over what Dan went through for the rest of the board so that they can understand the component pieces of this first amendment. And then as we continue to move forward, we'll, as things develop, if there's other things that need to come forward, this will be the venue that will kind of walk those through. So part of the reason that when we had these discussions is that these would be considered process and non-controversial pieces of an amendment versus something that might require deeper consideration or even potentially not agreeing to something. These were things that brought forward by our team, were things that were recommended, and that this will just aid in the development and the advancement of the process. Was that a fair?
I'm just gonna add that yes, but it's always up to the board what it wants to consider and what it feels is acceptable to leave on.
Dan, will you be at the school board meeting, or Kathy, are you just gonna cover this?
Yep, I'll cover this, and
Okay.
then we are hoping that Mark Laverty is also going to be there on the 15th. So we don't anticipate any major questions, but if any board members have questions, if we send this out in advance, we hope to tackle any questions or concerns prior to the meeting. Any other questions for Dan? And again, the document, the Cunningham presentation that we saw at the committee of the whole meeting is in board book, so people that are watching this, that want to see this, they could go back to that, which I'm casting, but you probably can't see on this screen, but just know that those component pieces are available as they discussed at our committee of the whole.
You're planning, oh, well, it's gonna be on the consent agenda. I was
Yes.
gonna- You don't expect to have any public discussion about it?
We don't, but we would certainly, if any board member, if there was anyone that needed to discuss it, it's allowed to be pulled from the consent agenda to be voted on independently.
So I think you and I talked about this, technically, you are permitted to discuss that at a closed meeting because it has to do with your negotiation of your purchase agreement. I'm not suggesting that that's the best course of action.
Yep, no, Yep, I think we felt that this was relatively straightforward, and if there was anybody that had any questions or concerns about it, that we would be able to answer that at the meeting.
So the next step for me is, I will work with the Saturday Properties and their lawyer, hopefully to get the last few changes done in the next couple of days. We've asked for some updates to some of these exhibits, so that you have that in hand. And I will put together a short memo of bullet points as to why we needed this, that we knew we needed this, how it relates to the master plan that people have seen, and how it changes your current agreement. So that will work for folks.
Thank you.
So on the business services consent agenda, there's a placeholder for this amendment right now that Jackie's put on there. And when we get that actual document, we'll send that out to all board members, and then it'll get posted to board book once it's final. Awesome, thank you.
Thank you,
So I
Dan.
can't really leave until I get that,
Yeah, you need me.
well, but I have no idea how long.
You can take a break.
Can we make this I think we can actually have a really solid meeting if we can just wait a little bit. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
This was a secret way to keep Dan Matty here for an awesome business services meeting.
So what's really going on is she made me appear in person because she thinks I won't talk about Two Harbors business.
Okay, so that didn't work. Dr. Kirby, do you want me just to run through the agenda, or do you want to?
It doesn't make a difference, I was going to go through it quickly.
You go ahead.
We'll see how quickly. All right, department reports. Teresa, do you have anything to add or expand to what's been presented to us?
I don't have anything to add, but I did want to expand on just the HR director updates. You probably had some email traffic about the Headstart vaccination issue, and I do plan to have a all board kind of response to that, just to let you know what the impacts are and what's happening. That'll go up tomorrow, so just to update, there's about 9 to 10 employees right now that are being affected by that. But that is all I have to update, in addition to what's already there.
Okay. Can you just indicate again what the requirements are, the federal
Sure.
requirements for that?
Yep, so the Headstart mandate requires that anybody that is in any kind of contact with any Headstart children or parents or funded by the Headstart program funds need to be fully vaccinated.
And it's a federal.
It is a federal.
And but could you explain about why the religious exemptions were denied? I understand it, and I know it's part of the law, but just for anybody that's watching, because I think that's the crux of the argument, is that these employees asked for an for an exemption, and we denied them.
So the religious requests that we have received to this point have all been reviewed independently of each other, but they're all very similar in nature. In discussion with our attorneys and review of that, it did not meet the threshold of a religious exemption.
Thank you for that. But I understand. I looked up the entire law myself, and the EEOC, website, that's very long, but yeah, I agree with the decisions that have come forth.
Okay, thanks, and you're gonna give us another update in the next couple of days?
Yes, I'll have some communication on tomorrow, actually.
Okay, anything else? Excellent. I'll get my team going here. Next thing was financial verbal report, finance department.
If you wanna just give a brief update on your world and the things that are.
So should I go down to the budget summary? Or?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so I'll do the budget summary. It's enclosed in your agenda. I have the top part is all self-explanatory with your revenues and expenses. Down below, I have included numbers that we've spent so far for ESSER 2, which is $3,315,376.74. And I've included numbers which we've spent in Fund 6, which is our building money, bond money, of a little over $2 million. And then I have also included numbers for our student activity accounts, revenue of $764,131, and expenses of $799,399. We have started our first process of closing down our student activity accounts. We went to a bank a week and a half ago, and they wrote us the checks, and we'll be working with about 5 more banks, and working closely with auditor help as to bringing that money in properly and the correct account codes and whatnot.
And if y'all remember, this was all a part of the Department of Education restructuring student activities, that we kind of kept them separate and had multiple banks and multiple software at a local level, and the Department of Education said, nope, they all need to be in your general fund, they need to be a part of your books. And so we were given a 1-year reprieve when we had notified them that we were changing softwares last year, so we're about a year behind, but that was with approval from the Department of Education. So I just want to say to Simone and her team who have been doing this work, and to our building leaders and department folks, this was not an easy task. We had to revise a lot of codes, we had to build a lot of codes, and that finance team did a really, really good job. And I think everyone feels like they understand that we just replaced dollars in different places. Money didn't go away, money didn't disappear, it's still within our systems, it's just we had to report it differently because that's what the Department of Education required.
Thanks, I just have a bookkeeping question. Where does that $31 million sit? Can we get the $2 million we've already spent?
So it sits with PMA, it's one of our financial advisors, and then monthly, it's a great question, monthly I go into Skyward and I retrieve all the Fund 6 expenses, and I put that into an Excel spreadsheet and I send it to them, and then they take that $2 million now, they'll transfer it to our checking account, so to speak. So we get reimbursed for all those months, which is why it's nice for you to see how much we've spent so far. And we do a monthly reimbursement back to our general fund.
And then one other addition that I wanted to add, and for whatever reason, I could not print from my computer today, so I'll have to talk to Bart. So up on the screen, we had talked at our last HR finance or HR business. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to pause. I had spoken with Superintendent and with Chair Eater. We've changed the name of this committee from HR Finance to HR Business Services to better reflect that we cover many departments within our systems, and we felt that that was a better representation of what occurs at this meeting. So I just wanted to know for further reference that that's how that's. Did you want to?
Yeah, I was just gonna, assuming that there's no board outcry over the change of the more appropriate.
More appropriate?
The bigger things that make it up.
Yeah. So at our last meeting, we talked about a budget revision on the revenue side. You see budget revisions on the expenditure side every month from Simone as we collect more information and there's changes, but We've been talking for several months about the enrollment projection that we did back in June of 21 to adopt our 2022 budget. And as we looked and have continued to monitor our enrollment, and we'll discuss enrollment here in just a moment, after discussion and working with our finance team, we felt that we wanted to reduce the estimated adjusted ADM, which is the driver of that base general education revenue, from 8180, which is what we budgeted, to 8005. That is more in alignment with where we're going to see projected pupil counts by the end of this year. And as you remember, starting now until the end of the year, we continue to see enrollment declines in the second half of the school year. And right now, you're going to see on the February report that we're at about 8,050, but we continue to see that decline as we go along through the end of the year. So we hope this is maybe slightly conservative and that this may rebound a little bit before the end of the year, but we really felt it was important to reflect that piece. And that general fund revenue is that calculation of different component pieces of state aids and levies, but this is the aid component of that. And what we had budgeted based on the 8180 was 68,638,138. Doing the recalculation based on the 8,005 would bring us down to 67,764,630, which is a revenue reduction of 873,508. So that is just our recommendation that will move forward through the consent agenda, that will be reducing the Fund 1 general education revenue estimate down 873,000. And as you recall, we've invested ESSER funds to fill those gaps right now. And right now, with some other things that have come off and some other changes we have, ESSER will be absorbing that difference. So we're not at this point going to be asking for any expense reductions because of this revenue reduction. That this is just an acknowledgement that the estimate of general fund revenue was a little bit high, with the hopes that we were going to see re-enrollments of students that had unenrolled in fiscal year 21. Thank you.
And it's legitimate to use the ESSER funds for it?
Yes,
I assume.
it is.
All right. Anything else on items?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then
I think it is important to note, though, that there are a number of districts that are using ESSER funds to offset those effects of decline in enrollment, but decline in enrollment, as Kathy has pointed out on numerous occasions, it does affect the overall trajectory of the district, and if there isn't a rebound, there will have to be an accounting in some way in the future that could result in pretty significant shifts of resources, as far as cutting budgets and or potentially having to lay off individuals.
But for this year, it's covered.
Say that again?
For this year, it's covered.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So that really covers the enrollment report too, unless you have anything else to add.
Just as if anyone reviews it and has any questions on it, it is being projected right now at an adjusted ADM at 8,049, which is again lower than our projected 8180. But again, we feel like this is, when Cattery does these, it's like at this point in time, and we already know there's most likely going to see some projected enrollment loss through the end of the year. So consistent, similar to what we've seen at this point of the year and prior years as far as trending, but again, we're hoping to see more re-enrollments.
All right. Next is nutrition. Other than not 4 kinds of milk, anything?
So it was really funny when I spoke with Sheila Oak. I had received an email blast from one of our support organizations who said, "Watch out, there's a milk issue," and didn't really know anything about what that actually meant. And so I just forwarded it to Sheila and said, "Hey, I don't know what this means," and apparently there's issues with milk cartons, being able to produce milk cartons. So there's a change in productivity and the kinds of milk we can get. And just again, the continuation of letting folks know that we're in the process of working with Sheila. We continue to see some staffing challenges there, but hopefully we'll be able to start looking at some improvements in that area. And then just continued supply chain issues and challenges that we continue to have just because of the world market and all those type of things, but our team is so adaptable. They work through a lot of crises on a daily basis that most people probably don't know, so appreciate our child nutrition team a lot.
All right. Next is facilities. Anything to add or stress, or?
No, thank you, Member Kirby. I won't read it, it's fairly short this month, but I do want all to know that our facilities maintenance and operations staff are working extremely hard, doing a great job, and I'll open it up to any questions that anybody might have.
I was glad to see there weren't any confirmed COVID cases according to the,
In the work out.
yeah, or anywhere. I mean, just people not getting it,
Right.
not being transferred, so that's good. Can you update us on what historical central status is at this point?
We can. We're gonna be closing tomorrow, hopefully, right?
The documents are signed, so.
Pending nothing happening to Dan Matty, who's now the owner of the documents, who's gonna get them to the right people. This has been quite the journey, and there's a great team of people who have been involved in this. I would have said as late as yesterday, I wasn't sure tomorrow was gonna be the closing day. I thought we were maybe gonna need more
As late
time.
as 11 a.m. today.
Yeah. There was just some final component pieces related to the historic preservation and some other things that needed to be in these documents in order for Dan to move forward, and we were able to get those things resolved today, so. This is, when did we, October of 2020?
Yeah,
Was the original
it was
purchase agreement?
Fall of 2020.
So,
When I was filling out the ECRV on time online, it says, was the purchase agreement more than 2 years ago? And I had to, not quite.
yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you.
Technology, Martin?
Bart isn't here, he did the report at the committee of the
Yep.
whole, so
Oh,
he didn't
okay.
feel like he wanted, but we wanted to keep it on this agenda as a record of, that this will be the homing place for that technology report on a monthly basis, but there had been a request from a board member to get an update at the committee of the whole, so, but normally that report will be found here.
Okay, I just had a question, what suspicious logins are?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
Suspicious logins, see, that's one of the things he puts down there.
Yep, so they track when there's people who try to infiltrate our systems. And so when they see those, then they, our system records those.
Is that, I would like to know if that's just the number of times employees are putting in the wrong password or not.
Could be, I may represent one.
I have on
1% of
occasion.
those.
Superintendent Mega's top user, no, that's not true. I will ask Bart first and follow up and make sure we get that information for you.
All right, transportation.
Steve Johnson's still working on his report, but again, just wanted to share with folks that, again, we have not had to implement our route closure. As you know, back in November, we had created a system that if in the event that we didn't have enough bus drivers to run all of our routes, we had a system created where we would notify and potentially not run specific routes in the district. We have had days, several, where it's been like, we just had the right amount of drivers to make the day work. Our contractor Voyager has worked really collaboratively with the district, and at times we have shared routes with each other to make sure we could get that done. So I just want to, give kudos to that team. But we continue to see some applications, but it's a challenging market right now, a challenging position to get filled, but we continue to feel comfortable. COVID was one of the reasons why we were seeing some challenges, is that we had, especially at Voyager, there was a little peak where they had a lot of people out on quarantine, but with some of the quarantine changes since then, we've been able to mitigate that a little bit better, so.
Next, this is for our consent agenda. I just wanted to mention on the staffing report, Jay Ressler, who is
Yeah.
I was gonna ask the same thing,
Yeah.
like, where are we in replacing him, because
I
those are
just like
big
to say
shoes.
thanks to him, yeah.
Yeah, so he and I have had conversations about it, and we are going to do a posting right after the winter break, so that it can, so the individuals can start applying for that position. So just want to have some internal conversations before we make the posting.
Sure, I would really appreciate getting that posted and, perhaps even somebody on board before he leaves rather than paying somebody to mentor after they leave.
Absolutely.
It just makes more sense for people to depend on their retirement date.
Just a few notes on the consent agenda from an HR perspective. We will not be bringing forward the approval of the year's job description. And then I don't know if you needed any explanation on the 22-23 calendar. After reviewing it, we realized that it was in conflict with all the other bargaining units. So the teachers were working, but nobody else would. So we had to make a few adjustments there. So that's why it's a correction.
Okay.
I guess I didn't know what difference is there?
They had the teachers coming back to work on the 2nd of January, which is a holiday for every other bargaining unit. So we just made some adjustments. So the winter recess will start on Friday instead of Thursday, and then they'll have that Monday as well.
Let's see. What else did we have here? Financial report went over budget revisions, fundraisers. We went a lot. $40 is all, but good for them.
And just as a reminder on fundraisers, sometimes we get them in batches from the buildings, so it's not that there might not be fundraisers happening, but how they report them back to the district and they get on these monthly reports sometimes lag a little bit, so have no fear if you think there's a fundraiser happening, it probably will be on the next agenda.
January, February is a hard time to raise funds.
Yes.
So we don't get it. Okay. No bids, quotes, RFPs. The joint powers agreement.
Yes, so there's a document attached to board book. This is the Project Aware grant that the district received. It is $1.86 million. We received it actually back in November, and they asked for a joint powers agreement. They did this with the 3 other districts in the state who were former recipients, and it just outlines just basically agreements and just wanting to make sure everybody knows and HR is aware of this, that there's a component piece of required vaccination or weekly testing with this joint powers because the state of Minnesota and the Department of Education require that, and because we're utilizing funds that are is federal dollars representing the state, they're making us follow their rules. And so that's the main reason for the joint powers agreement, is to basically, the funder is the federal government, the state was the recipient, we're a sub-recipient, so we're just putting an agreement together to say we agree with the things that they're required to do, we will also do those same things.
Does this represent new positions that will have to be filled, or is this funding of current people?
It did hire 2, it is currently funding 2 people, a coordinator and an interventionist. And then the rest of the funds are being utilized for professional development and other opportunities.
And will we be monitoring this, the results of this? I mean, it's supposed to be.
So the actual implementation of Project Aware will be running through the Teaching and Learning Department, and you'll be hearing from them on a regular basis on the goals. Just the joint powers needed to run through the contract standpoint, so that's why it's here. But the actual results and information will run through Teaching and Learning and through probably the committee of the whole.
When does it start? I didn't notice that.
In November. We received the money in November, so they've been working, and as part of our agreement to get this forward, because this was a competitive grant that we weren't 100% sure we were going to get, we had funded with ESSER dollars the first 2 months of the school year for those folks, and now Project Aware is taking that over.
And if you have a chance to take a look at the document that's in there, it also details the quarterly evaluation of the programming. So there are some reporting requirements around the impact of the program and activities that are being implemented within the district.
And Callie DeBrent is the main coordinator, so she's the one who built the budget, has worked with Simone. We have that all pre-built in to monitor all those pieces, and then the reporting back to the state. There's quite a bit involved there.
Alright, let's see. The placeholder for collective bargaining agreement between,
This is the non-certified business.
Yes. I'm sorry, it's actually a 2020-2021 contract, so, even though it's technically,
This is the last one.
Yeah.
This is the last one, and now we're all done
and
with
everything going forward
2021.
will be current, yes.
So does this contract, how is it applicable to the employees now? Are they getting back pay? And
Yes.
and is that essentially it? Or what are
Yes, there was no substantial changes other than.
Is there any particular reason why this one took so long?
Just changes in our HR staff who had been working with that team. There was some language in relation, there was just some specific things related to their sick leave and one other piece, and it just kind of got bogged down in the system. So it was more of a conversation as we led into having different HR leaders, and Teresa was very kind to grab it and finish it off for us.
Thank you.
alright, acceptance of donations, we always thank those, and there were some significant ones. Placeholder we talked about. District property update, talked about. Anything in the expenditure or new cost contracts that?
I just had a question about the donation.
Sure.
The choir youth trip, is that happening this year, and does it still happen with our COVID policies?
I don't know the answer to that question.
When is the date of that?
We don't have all the, we just get the donation, so,
Yeah,
but
I
that's a
don't know
great
anything
question.
more about it.
So right now, we are still moving forward with some of these opportunities, obviously, not overnight opportunities. So we have first calls with some of those opportunities if it's overnight trips.
Well, I'm guessing it's overnighted because it's a $10,000 donation.
But we are just starting conversations again to see if we're gonna have some change in directions related to all these kinds of activities, but those conversations have not happened. And we're early in that.
Actually meeting tomorrow morning, hopefully.
Okay.
All right, I had a question about expenditure contracts. Did you see the final amounts that were actually spent on those? Because those amounts there are what can be spent on too.
Sure, I mean, at the time when we provide these informational, these are the amounts we put in, but we can certainly, if there's
What?
any specific contract that you're interested in knowing the final, I'd be happy to share that.
No, I just wondered if we ever get that back.
I don't know that we report actuals once the contracts have been signed or agreed upon. They're always in our ending final, edited or audited financial statements on a high level, but, we know we can't spend more than what's on the list, so we're always within that, unless we do an amendment. And you've probably seen several of those from we've seen several from adult basic education. We've had some adjustments, so you've seen that come in multiple times where we see amendments. Some of our American Indian contracts that we have where they've added on days and they didn't realize what they had asked for as far as the limitations. So those will come forward as amendments to those.
Okay. All right, let's see. I guess lastly, grant applications, there was one.
Well, I have a question about the no-cost contract.
Sure.
What exactly is WeVideo doing?
So WeVideo is just a platform for our elementary curriculum specialist asked for an agreement so that teachers could use WeVideo as a platform for students and teachers to provide video content.
Oh, okay. And why does Zoom need some educational data?
So this is just, we have to just put this on, we have to sign an agreement with Zoom in order to use their platform because we're a Google district. And so it was just the place to put it to have that agreement.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, that's
Okay. We have one grant application, Tracy Lippman, $4,000 for feeding people, which hope she gets.
And we just wanted to share too that we're appreciative of our grants committee has reformed so that we're reviewing the grants. We kind of had a little period of time where you might have seen both the grant application and the grant award at the same board meeting. We've just had so much going on, and just wanted to thank Assistant Superintendent Bonds and his department. We bring in people from facilities, technology, and finance to review the grants to make sure that we can be in compliance with if there's potential matching money, if there's facilities requirements or technology requirements, that the grantee who's asking for the dollars knows that there's potential component pieces of that. We've run into issues in the past years where we've received, a grant or we've gotten a donation, but then the cost to retrofit a room or do something has had a high cost to it. So we're just appreciative of kind of front loading this, and we really appreciated Tracy. She got it to us in advance so we could get this on there, and so we're hoping for a positive result there too.
All right, I think that's it, unless there's something else.
This was a great meeting.
Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
that's meeting.